Thank you, Chairman. My name is Judith McGeary, and I'm with the Farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance, and we are testifying against the bill. I want to start by saying that I do recognize that water transfers are probably necessary. There is movement of water that has happened and that will happen and that needs to happen. I also recognize that this is a study and it doesn't change anything immediately. But the reality about studies is very often the outcome is determined by how you set them up to begin with. And we have some very deep concerns about how this study is being structured in terms of the legislative findings that preface it, who's involved and what's included. Let's be clear, when we're talking about water transfers, what we're talking about is a necessity. Water is the basis of everything we do. You cannot have a business, you certainly can't farm, and you can't even live someplace if you don't have water. And our concern, one of our major concerns, is that very often when we talk about water surpluses in this state, and does an area have a water surplus, is we are looking at the current water situation for that community based on its current activities. So what we are doing, if we start with that, if that's our starting point, and you transfer water based on that, you are determining those communities' futures. You are saying they will not be able to grow. There will not be new business. We will not be able to revitalize our agricultural systems. We will not be able to make them new population centers. And that's terrifying for me as an advocate for rural communities. Many of our members are also urban members, and they support agriculture and want to see a future for our agricultural lands. We have suggested amendments. We think conservation has to be listed in this. We think stakeholders have to be involved throughout the process. And we have to recognize that you need to look at the long-term future impacts on any communities when you're taking water to a new area. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gangnes?
Thank you, Chairman Perry.
Put your, get your mic and put it in front of you, please.
Sorry. Chairman Perry, my Senator Colcourse, how do you do? And members, my name is Michele Gangnes, and I'm a Lee County landowner and a director of the League of Independent Voters of Texas, a rural-urban coalition of independent-minded Texans. We oppose Senate Bill 1907. Senate Bill 1907 calls only for a study, that's true, but it is important that a study that's intended to study a statewide water grid and water market be predicated on an unbiased, objective set of parameters. This bill assumes that moving water is the ultimate answer, and that we are all that we're willing to study is how to move mass quantities of water. That should not be acceptable. We shouldn't do this study, at least not yet. We need to know whether the grid and market is a good idea and to what extent. The League urges you that you consider amendments that the League worked on with environmental stewardship. Mr. Box will speak to you about those, not in an effort necessarily to rehabilitate this bill, but as a reminder of what needs to happen and for the concepts we asked you to introduce into the bill and why we asked for those. We urge you to first study how do we save as much water as possible with a statewide commitment to the most effective conservation and reuse practices in order to manage our demand and reduce our need to move water, and second, study whether a water grid and water market of the magnitude envisioned in this bill is the best idea or even a good idea. We all know what's happening in California because of drought and mismanagement of water. If we don't find balance between groundwater pumping for cities, farms, and industries and maintaining sustainable aquifers, between groundwater pumping and protecting the contributions of groundwater to surface water, if we try to trump Mother Nature rather than modify our human behavior, we do so at our peril. Thank you. Thank you, and I do appreciate the Senator's remarks in introducing the bill. If that stakeholder process, that's one of our suggestions, and I didn't see that in the bill, so thank you. I'm pleased to answer questions.
Mr. Box?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Chairman Perry, and my Senator Colcourse. I'm Steve Box, Executive Director of Environmental Stewardship, and I'm registering against the bill. Honestly, I wanted to register on the bill, but as I studied the bill and all that it needed to make this a balanced bill, my colleagues convinced me to change my mind. This bill is stacked against the balancing mandate of the Conservation Amendment of the Texas Constitution and seeks to stack the decks in favor of aggressively building a water grid and against aggressively conserving and protecting our water resources. I'm offering this testimony on a red-line copy of the bill that attempts to rebalance the bill. I hope that you will come to see this as a win-win to reframe this bill. This bill is based on the premise that a water grid is the best solution to the Texas water issues and proceeds to develop an implementation of such a vision. We believe that the initial inquiry should be whether the grid is needed, and then also whether the grid and the marketing are needed in the form they are envisioned. The question is whether the water marketing itself would be adequate. It's appropriate that if we're going to go forward with this, that the legislature have the guidance to the Texas Water Development Board to investigate the reasonable means for accomplishing this, with two distinct needs. One, the first need to conserve the groundwater, the surface water of the resources of the state, and the second need to develop the groundwater and surface water resources. We believe that there are a number of provisions that need to be added to the bill, and those are outlined in the handout that I have given you and the red line that is attached to that. So I won't go into the detail of those, but certainly two aspects that we think are very important are the stakeholder aspect, and secondly, that we get some guidance on the science that goes into this. Thank you.